Britain is bracing itself for the peak of a disease that has already transformed the country.
Got to be ready potentially for 4 times the number we've got at the moment.
Confirmed deaths over 12,000.
Oxygen saturation 93%.
We go beyond the cold, hard numbers.
I've got to tell you, I thought that I was going to lose her.
Every battle is personal, often lonely. We meet those still fighting it.
It just was the most terrifying experience I think I've ever been through.
Really steady.
And the medics making choices they can't avoid.
I don't feel like I'm being able to give the patients what they really need.
To find out if Britain is winning its battle against COVID-19.
Political leaders are preparing to unite to deliver a stay-at-home this Easter campaign. How long will these current restrictions we're living under continue?
From above, deceptively calm.
This morning.
It's being predicted the total number of people in the UK to die from COVID-19 will pass the 10,000 mark this weekend.
The UK's death toll is up.
But Britain is already convulsed with worse to
plea
come.
for people to stay home and save lives.
We're in Kent, the so-called Garden of England. But with over 1,500 confirmed cases of COVID-19, it is the third largest cluster in the UK outside London. In this strange war against an invisible enemy, this is what passes for a front line. The respiratory ward at Tunbridge Wells Hospital, where COVID patients are battling for the most basic right, the right to breathe.
It's terrifyingly frightening because you don't know what to fight or how to fight it, and you've got nothing but just what's in here to get you through. It was the worst experience I've ever had in my life.
Glynis was admitted to Tunbridge Wells Hospital after 2 weeks of illness with what she thought was a gastric problem. She didn't have any of the usual symptoms but tested positive for COVID-19 and was taken to intensive care. She's now on the respiratory ward.
At one point when the doctor said, we're thinking of putting you off to sleep for a while, and he said that there's this machine which could save your life, and he said, and Glynis, he said, I'm willing to bet that you've got that bit in you to do that. And he said, if you are ready to fight this, I'm ready to fight it with you. And we're going to do everything we can. And I think it's at that point that you needed to hear those words, because you felt it was just so on your own and you knew they didn't know what they were doing. It just was the most terrifying experience I think I've ever been through.
Come on. And you've got to think, you know, it's 1-0 to you at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah? You've come all that way, you're out of ICU, you're on a normal ward.
Yeah.
These are all steps in the right direction.
Yeah.
Right?
It's just, you know, when you can't have your family around you as well. Yeah. And I wouldn't want them to come up here, not for anything in the world. If someone said to me, one person can, I wouldn't pick them. I wouldn't want them up here.
Oh, so many from different people. I can't tell you how many she's had. Dozens of them.
Distance is the emotional curse of COVID. Colin is Glynis's husband, reduced to waiting at home, barred from hospital because of the risk of infection.
She's got, from grandchildren, lots of the grandchildren. What do I miss? Well, Glynis is one of these ladies that likes to wear perfume and not a lot of makeup. And Glynis always smells nice. And I miss the smell of her. She's got lovely hands to touch. She's got beautiful features. She's got lovely skin. She's just a lovely lady to be around. And what's best of all, she laughs at my silly jokes. Not everybody does. So yes, we have a nice time together. There's only a couple of photographs here of our wedding. So that's about 20 years ago. That was Glynis then.
When it came, the diagnosis of COVID felt like an inexplicable sentence.
It's just even now, it seems quite surreal. Because she didn't have a temperature, she didn't have a fever. And although she had a slight cough, it wasn't by any means a rasping, hacking cough. Anyway, she didn't show any of those signs. And then, of course, it moved on. She was then admitted into the high dependency ward. The next day, the doctor told me that she was in the intensive care, excuse me, she was in intensive care and that they were thinking about putting her into a coma. Well, on that Saturday morning, I've got to tell you, I thought that I was going to lose her.
For Colin, the absence of Glynis is its own illness.
And this is Glynis's favourite place. We pull the curtains around, especially when the day has been hot. Pull the curtains around, sit in the shade, sit out, and she calls this a day bed. It's her favourite pastime, doing nothing, listening to the music coming through the doors. That's what Glynis is looking forward to. And she said to me, that was one of the things that kept her going, with the thought of being here and being able to sit quietly and relax and get better.
One day at a time.
Yeah, I suppose that's what's got me this far. It's one day at a time.
One of the hospital's own, 59-year-old Shirley, is also being treated on the respiratory ward. Originally from the Philippines, she usually works as an A&E nurse. She got symptoms after a shift and self-isolated. A high temperature for 11 days brought her back into hospital. She knows the meaning of the numbers.
104/70.
It's all right. That is normal for me. Yeah. Yesterday it's about 150. At least my heart rate is very good, 99% oxygen now. It is normal for me. I always check.
Shirley is also worried about her sister who works in a nursing home and has a high temperature, and her brother-in-law who tested positive for coronavirus and is now in hospital in Swindon.
Yeah.
Okay man.
Yeah, I'm not breathless at the moment. So they remove already my oxygen because my oxygen is 190. I keep thinking that I keep my mind strong to be more alert, and then just keep thinking if it will come, it will come. If it will, life is too short for us. But I keep thinking and praying that God will help me, and then if I could survive with this situation.
Dr. Webster is in charge of the respiratory ward with its 30 beds. 13 of those have been used to provide non-invasive ventilation. As well as looking after Shirley, he's been monitoring Glynis's progress.
So she presented with tummy pains, with diarrhea and cough. She's got high blood pressure as a comorbidity. And she required, when she came in, 60% oxygen. So she had a temperature and she required a lot of oxygen when she came straight in. And then she's progressed by weaning her oxygen ever since. And so you see her now, she's just on 28% oxygen, which is a dramatic improvement, as you can see. So when I saw her this morning, she was sitting out in her chair, so she was maintaining oxygen levels at 93%, which is acceptable. And we'll continue to do that until she gets out of here.
Do you know, I can't wait to be back at home again. But the fear of being without oxygen and not having this there, It's like terrifying.
Well, it would be too early to take that off you yet.
Yeah.
What we'll do is, as I say, every day we'll check what's going on. The nurses are checking very regularly, as you know.
Yeah.
If we're managing to wean your oxygen gradually, that just means that actually the lungs are getting less inflamed and improving. And we're all breathing 21%.
Okay.
That's coming back up nicely. And so that means that, you can imagine, 60% is quite a lot of additional oxygen taken to the lungs, and we've gradually seen your oxygen levels, the amount you're needing, drop down to the point that you're nearly on 21%, which is what I'm on.
Right, okay. Thank you.
All right.
Grateful.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Glynnis fits into the demographic of patients that they're typically treating in hospital.
It's really very variable. We've had patients in their 40s, late 40s, up to patients in their 70s and 80s. And it really depends. This is the high dependency unit for patients who don't end up on the intensive care unit, but it spans a whole range. They tend to end up, though, on here if they have other medical problems. I haven't seen anybody on this unit yet, that's not the intensive care unit, it's the HDU, who hasn't got another medical problem on top of their the COVID that's brought them here.
The work of the doctors and nurses caring for Glynnis and other sick patients is integral in this struggle to save lives. But those on the front line out in the community are also crucial. Charities play a huge role in supporting the NHS, and here in Kent, demand has increased massively in the past few weeks for the so-called blood runners. These rapid response volunteers have gone from being an out-of-hours courier service to a 24-hour one.
Neil speaking. Plate this for Maidstone. Yep, no problem. All right, cheers. The sort of things we're collecting, so microbiology samples we're collecting, and amongst them will be COVID-19 samples. We're also collecting blood samples for inter-hospital, so between different labs. We collect reagents for the machines that do the sampling.
They've managed to fill their rota for the next 5 weeks in just 42 hours with volunteers like Neil. Most use their own vehicles and provide their own fuel whilst on duty.
Hello, I've got some platelets for you.
You have, thank you.
And a big thing that we've seen an increase in is home dialysis samples from patients' homes. And we're also delivering medication to patients who have recently had transplants and where they can't leave their houses either.
Would you like it? There you go. Thank you. Bye.
One of the local businesses who've expanded their repertoire is the family funeral service in Maidstone. Robert helps run this undertakers with his dad. He's now using funeral cars to ferry people with coronavirus symptoms from their homes to a so-called GP-led hot hub where patients are treated.
It's nice and long, so you can keep that distance between yourself and the passenger in the back, but it also has a screen partitioning the driver from whoever is in the back also, so you get that bit of protection from that aspect of things as well. I give them a rough time when I'll be there. I turn up, I put some gloves and a mask for whoever I'm picking up on their doorstep. Give them a call. Hello sir, it's Robert here from the Maidstone Hub. Hello. Right, I've placed you some gloves and a mask on your doorstep. Get them to wash their hands and that, and get into the vehicle on the driver's side rear door. drive them to the hub. They go through the tent, get all their treatment and whatever they're having, and then drive them back home again afterwards.
The hot hub is in the car park of the Maidstone Leisure Centre. Robert fits this driving service in with his commitments to the family business, funerals. He and his father have had to adapt, including to the panic buying of coffins.
At the present moment, I think there are 9 deceased on the premises, only 2 that are COVID. Our greatest risk is when we collect somebody from in the community, someone who dies at home. Then we have to be extra careful. So COVID risk labels are on the top of those 2 coffins to keep them, just to keep us sure that we know when we move the coffins around.
This is stitch bond, and we put this on the edges to keep the frill away from the edge, so that it makes it look a bit more cushiony, basically. You'll see what I mean in a minute. The coffin supplier has told us that other funeral directors are stockpiling coffins, so we've had to order them in bulk, as it were. We've had to place 2 orders. Otherwise we won't get them for 2 months, because we ordered them about a month ago, and the next order after one we've got coming isn't coming until the 20th of May. So yeah, quite a long time to wait for coffins. That's why I had to drive up there to pick some up.
Funeral directors up and down the land will tell you that we're often the last to be considered. Which may be fair enough because we're the last to be affected, but we are physically very affected by the deceased. They're on the premises. There are some here now, COVID cases, and we are very much affected when we go to the hospital to collect somebody. We need to know what they've died of, so we need to know how to handle that deceased.
We've been given a list of things that we need to wear, but it's difficult to get it. So I've had to order goggles, but we're meant to wear disposable ones, but we obviously can't get any. So I've got ones that we can wipe down and clean afterwards. We're following all the guidelines that Public Health England have given us in regards to PPE. So yeah, feel relatively safe, yeah.
Actually attending the service itself, where we would join with other members of our family to express our grief and allow it out, which is a problem with the stiff upper lip that we have. But if we do this process properly, then we cope with this death properly. At the moment it's really, really, really tough. Here in this part of Kent we're down to 10 people only attending at the crematorium.
After the break, we go to the critical care unit, bracing itself for a deluge of patients.
If there's only one ICU nurse to 4 patients, you don't want to think about having a big surge, because it is quite scary to be honest.
We're right on the front line in Kent as Britain battles with the coronavirus pandemic.
It's 6:30.
Dr. Andy Taylor exudes a calm that belies the reality of his daily mission.
I am just about to start a 12-hour day shift in our COVID intensive care unit. I'll be in the red zone, the place where we expect the virus to be. Any patients who come in needing to be put off to sleep and put onto a ventilator, that will be my job. The amount of work we have to do will depend on how people have been doing with their isolation. If the numbers are as initially predicted without the isolation, our capacity will be really stretched. let's just hope we don't need to use too many of those beds. Anyway, better get ready for work.
The headlines this morning. Doctors treating COVID-19 patients say they're being forced into impossible situations.
But the British Medical Association said staff faced heartbreaking decisions.
Andy is a consultant anaesthetist at Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells NHS Trust. He works in intensive care, known as ITU, and is about to assess COVID patients. But first, Andy must get dressed for work, the full protective kit, known as PPE.
I've got a surgical gown, I've got 2 pairs of gloves, I've got a hat. The mask, I find, is the bit that makes you feel the hottest. Your breath stays within the mask, and therefore you're always breathing warm air. We've had a couple of instances of people getting very hot, getting faint, getting giddy. It's nice to get it off at the end of a period of time of being in here.
The government has been forced to concede that some hospitals haven't received all the PPE they need, but there doesn't appear to be a shortage here.
This is our first Bay of 4 red zone COVID patients. These patients have been here anywhere between 7 days, and I think the longest one is about 2 weeks. They're making slow, steady progress. They all seem to go through the same sort of phase. Their lungs seem to be quite dry to start off with, and then after a period of a few days, they start producing lots and lots of secretions, and most of them are going through that phase at the moment. Now that's causing some problems. They get stuck and their ventilation becomes difficult. So normally you or I would be able to cough and clear those out ourselves. If you're on a ventilator, if you're anaesthetised, you can't do that. So we have to do that for them by suctioning the secretions out. The main problem we get with these patients is getting oxygen in.
The Trust's ITUs have seen 37 confirmed cases. Sadly, 9 have passed away. But 2 have now been discharged, and this man in his 60s is currently stable.
So lungs-wise we're still good, heart-wise, heart rate's good, blood pressure's good, he's not on any NORAD.
Looking after this patient is an orthopaedic surgeon in less familiar territory.
How are you finding it, looking after ITU patients? Did you do any ITU early on, training-wise?
No.
You haven't?
The first exposure I've had in the last few weeks.
So you've got 4 patients in here. How many ITU nurses?
1. There.
ITU patients are also attended by a dedicated nurse. On shift today, Rebecca.
So normally you'd have 1.5 of you, wouldn't you, for a...
Yeah, well, if you're lucky, one of
Yeah.
us should be enough.
Yeah.
But you definitely have people around to help. It's every half an hour the bags are running out, so it's just that manual kind of keeping on top of things. Yeah, it's hard work.
What do you think of the reports we're hearing we may need to increase the patient to nurse ratio? As in we might end up having 1 ITU nurse to more than 4 patients. I read something from the
I
Department
deal
of...
with that when it comes to it.
ITU nurses are in short supply, and Rebecca has gone from being part-time to full-time in order to help.
It's hot work, isn't it? All
Yeah.
this PPE. We try and be in the PPE for about 3 to 4 hours. So for a long day, we've had 3 breaks. It's more difficult for the ITU nurses to get out because we know how to use the machine. We've got a good team. The doctors are really supportive. We're all having to do slightly different roles. I'm probably in one of the worst rooms at the moment because there's only 1 ITU nurse to 4 patients. We don't want to think about having a big surge because it is quite scary to deal with.
We expect 80–90% of the population to have COVID, and there's a smaller percentage that ends up here. When we talked about who's in the at-risk groups, we know that men are more at risk than women. We know that men of a larger size are more at risk. There are certain drugs, there are certain conditions that make people more at risk. So we've been given a few different scenarios as to what might happen, the number of cases we might need to expect. Because the majority of people, we think when they get sick and they need to come to an intensive care unit, it doesn't happen straight away. It's a few days down the line, some of them 5 days, some of them 10 days. So we sort of get a bit of a picture as to what's going on in the hospital in our area before it hits us. And this Easter weekend, the weekend after, that's the sort of time we're expecting to get the biggest influx of
if that's going to happen. As I say, at the moment we have reserve, we have capacity. We just hope that we have enough.
Outside the red zone, senior doctors discuss the growing caseload.
Because of course normally we only have the upstairs ITU, which is a dependency maximum of 7, so we are double our normal situation at present.
But for the red zone patient being discussed earlier, the prognosis is looking good.
Well, so overnight he's very awake, on minimal sedation, he's on 28% oxygen at the moment. I think he looks pretty good.
Do you think he looks extubated?
I wouldn't be surprised.
COVID patients in intensive care only have a 50% chance of recovery. Another patient isn't doing so well. Difficult decisions lie ahead.
He's an elderly man. He's day 13 now. He's not really responding to an increase in support. I would question whether we would have the reserve to get over this.
Okay.
I think if he were non-COVID, we would be thinking about withdrawal.
Okay.
And he's slipped back, but in terms of his cardiovascular support, his kidneys still needing full support, he is quite frail.
So he's a fair gentleman who's now on 3 organ failure essentially, and not making any forward progress.
I'm happy to review him today and feedback to you at lunchtime if you want, but my thoughts would be that we should be looking at setting a ceiling and possibly withdrawing support.
Okay. Review him this morning.
Yeah.
We'll highlight him for a review at lunchtime, and then we may need to make some decisions and do a family discussion. Okay.
Dr. Michael Browning manages the department's caseload. Today, it's his job to stay in touch with the concerned relatives. He's updating the family of the patient they think could recover.
Hello. He's not quite there for us to take him to reliably keep him off the ventilator today. So he's still on the same support that he was on, and so I'm adding in another sedative which will help to ease really his extubation, but we may have to wait until tomorrow. If our plan to take the tube out doesn't come to fruition, then it means that he's going to need just a little bit longer time with airway protection. For the time being, that will be the plan, but we won't keep him here any longer than we have to. He'd probably go onto one of the COVID wards because obviously he's recovered from COVID, so he can go there, and they will look after him from that point of view, and he won't need us anymore, which is a great thing. It is, and it's very hard for you as well because we know you can't come and visit, and normally we'd have these conversations face to face, of course, and it's much easier for you and for us, to be honest with you. I mean, we're much better face to face human beings, aren't we? Yeah. I hope we have some better news for you tomorrow. All right, take care now. Bye bye. Yeah, tricky one. So yeah, he's just not waking up in the way that we'd expect him to. So hopefully he'll wake up and we can extubate him tomorrow. But failing that, I think he's scored himself a tracheostomy, and that'll allow us to keep him nice and safe, but also to move him on. When you reach a crisis like this, there's always something that's always in the back of your mind. Should I have done that? Should I have done something different? Could I have made a difference here? Could I have made a difference there? Should I have made that decision at that moment, or should I have made that decision earlier or later? But those are the questions that I think every doctor who's dealing with this crisis is asking themselves across the world. Been in situations where you've had multiple casualties, but this is where you have multiple casualties. We're preparing for multiple casualties every day, and it's like a multiple casualty incident that just goes on and on and on and on and on.
To keep COVID ITU patients isolated, the ward has been physically altered. Parts are cordoned off, new walls inserted.
This is our orange bay. So orange bays are for patients who we don't know whether they're COVID positive or not. While we're waiting for them to have their test, they go into the orange bay. If their test is positive, they then go round to one of the red bays. If their test is negative, then they go to the green ventilation, the normal ITU that we'd have in a normal time.
Staff take precautions as a new ITU patient is due to arrive in the orange zone from the operating theatre.
I think our patient's just arriving.
He'll stay here until his test results come back.
So the problem in here is trying to keep everyone separate, because we don't want to bring patients who don't have COVID in and then leave here with it.
But it's not just patients that need to be cared for.
So your family one?
Yeah, it took my wife a bit longer to get better than me.
Over at the Trust's sister hospital in Tunbridge Wells, the health and well-being of its staff is the responsibility of Dr. Peter Maskell, the medical director.
And of the A&E consultants, there's around a dozen of us. I was the third one of us to catch it, and there are now 5 of us, I think, that have had it confirmed on swabs. So I assume I caught it from work, from a patient, from one of my colleagues, but certainly at work.
The government has been criticised for being slow to test doctors and nurses for COVID-19 and get the ones that aren't infected back to work. This trust, however, is screening staff and can test up to 400 people a day, with the capacity to ramp that up to 700 if needed.
When they get to work, I think their biggest stress is protecting themselves. What PPE they should wear to protect themselves. Down the corridor we have a wobble room, and you know, we are all going to wobble. You know, I was on ITU yesterday and I walked off and I felt very emotional. It kind of brought it home to me a little bit. And so we've got a quiet area for people to go and talk. And also we've got quite a suite of support for staff in terms of counselling and just general mutual support that we all provide each other.
Across the country, hospitals are scaling back on non-essential procedures. But whether you have COVID-19 or not, there are some things you just can't stop.
So this here is the red zone in maternity, and this is where women who are labouring who are COVID positive have their babies. Within this unit we have had 2 babies that have been born to COVID positive mums. But we have to remember the mums are normally not so unwell that they need hospital admission, but they do need admission to the maternity unit to have their baby.
Up at 3 in the morning I got a call to say come to the hospital, the wife is about to give labour for the birth. When I came here it was quiet, it was empty. I rang the door and the nurse took my temperature.
The Trust is taking precautions with non-COVID mums as well. They can only have one visitor and he or she must be symptom-free.
Perfect, that's fine, I'll take
Thank you. With COVID-19 I was worried because I might miss my wife's labour, first child as well. Also getting the virus in the hospital.
Oh, yeah.
Now we have a baby girl, healthy baby girl, so really good, I'm pleased.
Dr. Saeed Hussain, a locum GP in Maidstone, is lucky to be alive. He's just been discharged by the Trust, winning his personal battle, one shallow breath at a time.
I got the symptoms, coronavirus, starting on 24th of March. I clearly remember it. And one day later, my daughter, she had the symptoms. And 2 days after that, my wife and son also got the symptoms. So I had symptoms for 7-8 days at home, and then I got really bad shortness of breath. So I was taken to hospital, where I was admitted. I was first taken to high dependence unit next to ITU, and after spending almost 18 hours there, I went to ward 21 in a respiratory ward. When I was slightly better, then my wife is admitted and she's in my next room actually. That was really shattering. It was the most difficult time for me. I came home and this is day 4. I'm still short of breath, but every minute I'm improving. I'm so grateful to have a second life. My wife came home yesterday. Cannot thank enough our colleagues. Only a mother can care for a child like that in that situation when you're totally helpless and completely dependent on others. And they were risking their lives, smiling, giving me individualized care. I cannot express my gratitude. What we can do in our part is to help them, is to stay at home, stay blessed, stay safe, keep NHS going.
Music to the ears of staff in Maidstone, who've increased the Trust's intensive care capacity to treat up to 92 patients. Andy is done for the day after a 12-hour shift.
You have to leave a certain amount of emotional baggage behind. I see people who are my age, who are not much older than me, who are poorly, who are ill, who a lot of them were pretty fit and healthy beforehand. So there's a certain amount of trying to make sure that I'm myself healthy, but also now trying to make sure that I don't go home and take any virus or any infection back to my children. This next week could be a very busy week coming after the Easter weekend, but we are got to be ready potentially for 4 times the number we've got at the moment, and that's when we'll really tell to see if our systems are ready and see if we're prepared.
With the much anticipated peak of this COVID-19 crisis still approaching, the NHS and its staff can do little more than wait. Coming up, we find out how they've coped.
But after 3 nights like we've had, I'm broken. And I don't feel like I'm being able to give the patients what they really need. I'm tired. Really tired.
Nearly 100,000 people have been confirmed with coronavirus in the UK. For those who develop worrying symptoms, the first port of call will probably be the Primary Care Treatment Centre, or HOT Hub. GP surgeries looking more like biological warfare units. This is also part of the front line. In Kent and Medway, there are around 20 sites like this. NHS meets school bazaar.
These masks here were delivered to us last week by a local school, and this whole tub were made by a local school as well with their 3D printer, which was fantastic. And the pillowcases here were made by one of my colleagues' choir, so that they're drawstring and we can put our scrubs in there and just put it all straight in the washing machine.
The team have been emailed instructions on how to wear their personal protective equipment. Getting it right could be a matter of life and death for them and their patients.
OK, if I can get you to put this face mask on, please. That bendy bit at the top, if you can nip it round your nose and tie it round the back of your head.
The next patient to arrive is George Ashmore. He's a 65-year-old lorry driver.
OK, if I can pop this in your finger, please.
He had coronavirus symptoms and self-isolated.
Oxygen saturation 93%.
Is that good?
A little bit on the low side.
And after 18 days, he got worse. He called his GP practice and was booked in here for an assessment.
Respiration rate 28.
The patient's breathing rate is much higher than normal, so he's asked to walk around for an extra check.
Looking at the numbers he's got and matching up against the news score, National Early Warning Score, he already scored a news of 5 at rest, which is enough to admit him to hospital, but as soon as he exercises and walks around the car park, that's dropped right off, and so that actually puts his new score up to 6 as well. So based on the gentleman's numbers, we're going to need to admit him to hospital. So what I'm going to do now is give him a ring. Hello, is that George? Hello George, my name's Ian, I'm a paramedic practitioner in the unit you're at. So we've had a look at your observations. and we are a little concerned with the history and your observations, particularly your oxygen levels, which are dropping off, that you are likely to be a COVID-19 patient. So what we need to do is get you admitted up to A&E.
Everything. I'm fit, active. It's just this has just knocked me off my feet. It's this is my 18th day. Yeah, I've been on self-isolation for 18 days. This is my first time out in 18 days. It's not improving much whatsoever.
I'm just going to write some information down on a little piece of paper and get my colleague to bring it out to you. If you then want to go up to A&E, get your wife to go inside, explain the situation, and then they will then take it from there and get you to the right area, etc. Is that okay?
Okay. Right, thanks for your help.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care, George.
Thank you, bye.
Bye-bye.
Very much concerned. Yeah. Not knowing what's going to happen is the worst part about it.
It doesn't look very well. It sounds very suspicious. And because of the length of time it's gone on, it probably is safer that he is checked out in hospital.
And it's this constant flow of new patients which proves that we are still mid-battle with no immediate end in sight.
Have a look through next door. Yeah, you're doing great. Okay. Coming to me.
Yep.
2, 3, slide. Lovely.
Thank you very much.
Happy?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's Easter Monday in the intensive care unit, and consultant anaesthetist Andy is back on shift, continuing to treat the sickest patients.
Do you know where you are?
The Easter weekend was busy and meant to be the peak in the UK, but experts believe that we might not have reached that point yet.
You've been very poorly. Really, really poorly.
Crossing up in long movement.
Yep.
Okay. Really steady slide and up. And then should I just say on 3?
Yep.
Okay, and then on 3. 1, 2, 3. Well done, guys.
One thing we're finding with a lot of these patients is that they become really, really weak. Their muscles, not just their breathing muscles, but their muscles, their arms, their legs, their head, everything becomes really, really weak. And this is common in intensive care anyway, but it's definitely a feature that's turning up with these people at the moment.
It's a demanding job, physically, mentally, emotionally, made harder by the indispensable but stifling layers of personal protective equipment. After coming off a long night shift, one of the other anaesthetists fainted.
Trudy, do you want tea?
Yeah,
I haven't stirred it, actually. Sleep. It hits you from all sides, doesn't it? It hits you from hunger, it hits you from drink, it hits you. Yeah.
It's exhausting.
It's really hard to get that across to people when they haven't done it, when they haven't been there. Even when we did the training stuff, and I was trying to say that this is how hot it's going to be, this is what it's going to feel. But until you actually sit there and put it on and feel that on your face.
Because of this extra pressure, the hospital is now rostering on more staff to allow more breaks on the night shift.
I think the worst thing is when you've got a patient who's dying in front of you and you feel really, really faint and hot and awful and you really don't know what to do. But after 3 nights like we've had, I'm broken. And I don't feel like I'm being able to give the patients what they really need. I'm tired. Really tired.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Good.
Right.
I'll give you a call later.
See you later.
Cheers.
The hourly struggle in hospitals only gives a partial view of the scale of the virus. One of the mounting battles is taking place in care homes. The job of looking after some of the most vulnerable has been made even more difficult. This is Cedardale, home to 25 elderly residents, most with dementia. One of them has already tested positive for COVID. He was discharged from hospital to continue recovery here, but with what consequences for the home?
He was in hospital for 9 days, really pleased to say he's made a marvellous recovery. I think because it's such an unknown disease, sending him back to us, they don't know, you know, does it last longer than those 7 days? Is he still a carrier? We don't know. But we had him back home, but the hospital have asked us to barrier nurse for a further 9 days just to ensure the safety of everybody.
They're hopeful that they can cope here, but others worry that housing residents who have the disease could trigger unnecessary outbreaks with deadly consequences. The government only announced today that care home residents in hospital will be tested before being sent home.
Come on, girls, come on.
The government has confirmed that there have been cases at more than 2,000 care homes in England, but up until now the number of deaths has been unclear because it can take weeks for them to be included in the official figures.
There are people dying in the community. There are people dying in residential homes from COVID-19, and they are not being made part of the statistics, and I think it's wrong.
Who's coming? Susie. Look, out here.
Susie Simmons, whose 88-year-old mum Maria is living with dementia, is anxious about her getting the virus.
I try to record every sort of moment that I get at the window with Mum, because we just don't know when it is going to be the last time. Bom dia.
They try their best to maintain some semblance of routine.
E dinheiro? She's going to drink it all in one shot. She's quite shut down at the moment, but there's a few things that I can say, or some music that I can play, that really help her to come alive. I'm going to put Mum's favourite music. Canta, Mãe. Mummy's singing
Back at the hospital on the respiratory ward, there is good news for Glynis.
I'm just letting you know that the doctor's been round and he seems quite happy that I shall be home on Friday.
Are you in the mood for a gin and tonic?
No. No alcohol in this body for a long while. This is my temple now. This is my temple. This morning I got up and I had a lovely shower, washed my hair and conditioned it, just doing all the things that we take for granted every day. It takes a lot to do it, but it's lovely, that feeling when you get out. You're all clean and it's not a bed bath and you're actually out. And then the doctor has said that hopefully by Friday I'll be able to leave. And when he says that it's time to go, he's taking me to the doors. And I can't wait to get home, to see my husband and to be back home again. Really can't.
Just take your time, all right? Just slow and steady.
Glynis appears to have won her private battle against COVID-19, a battle thrust upon her, a battle she never imagined and she could never have won without the legions who cared for her. It is one snapshot in one community of one country. It offers a glimpse of how the wider battle might be won. What it doesn't offer is certainty, especially when the worst is still to come.